bonus announcements. So, this morning, we're concluding the series on prayer. Next week, I'm starting a series on Isaac. And here's why I chose Isaac. Because Abraham is Father Abraham. You know, we sing, Father Abraham had many sons. Everyone knows about Abraham. And we make a big deal about Jacob. And he wrestled with God and his name was changed to Israel. But have you ever, once in your life, heard a sermon specifically about Isaac? No. Why? We just treat him like he's chopped liver. Chopped liver is bad, by the way. So I'm starting a series on Isaac next week. It won't go too terribly long because there's not a lot written about Isaac in the Bible. But I like to mix up what I preach about. I like to go New Testament. I like to go Old Testament. And I've been topical this series and the prior series on love. And I thought I need to just get back to some good old expositional Genesis. So, since I know that none of you have ever heard a sermon on Isaac, because you just told me, I expect you all to be here next week. So as we conclude the series on prayer, my title this morning is, because I have a clicker, but it works better if I turn it on, Pour Out Your Heart. Pour out your heart. Now I'm actually taking this line from Psalm 62, one of the passages I'm in today. Verse 8, David says, pour out your heart. But I just want to point this out about pouring out your heart. The reason God wants you to pour out your heart is because He loves you. See, how many of you have ever felt like no one really wants to listen to you? No one really cares. You know, you want to share and they're like, yeah, okay, well, I got to go, or something like that. God wants to hear everything, even though He already knows. He wants you to pour out your heart to Him. And in prayer, we make time for God to be our friend. We share with Him. We pour out our heart to Him. See, my beautiful daughter, we have a wonderful relationship and I love her so much. And so sometimes she'll just like, Dad, you doing anything? I'm just driving home. I just want to talk. Because we talk, because she's my friend. I'm her friend and her dad also. But I really like finding out what's going on in her life. Do you know why? Because I love her. And then I have my handsome son. He's not quite as verbal as my daughter. I wish he was more verbal. You know why? Because I want to know what's going on in him. See, it's like, how's school? Good. So, what are you doing? Nothing. So how are your classes? Math is hard. And I'm glad he shares these things with me. But I want to know more. Because I love him. I want to know what's going on inside of him. And your Father in heaven wants to know what's going on inside of you. He wants you to pour out your heart because He loves you. He loves you with a love that is so high and wide and long and deep, you will never understand it. He loves you that much. And prayer is your chance to just bask in His love. Like a cat sits on the windowsill soaking in the sun, it's our chance to just be with our Father in heaven, to make time for Him. And so the first psalm I'm going to look at today is Psalm 62. It was written by David. We don't know when it was written. We do know this. David was going through some problems. He was struggling. There were some people that were attacking him. And the beauty about not knowing what it is, I mean, maybe it was political unrest. Maybe he's being the king and there are some people who are like, we just don't think David's a good king. Like when Absalom tried to revolt and overthrow him. Or maybe it was one of these things where they found out about his affair with Bathsheba and everyone's talking, we just think David's a bad guy. And whatever's going on, he's being attacked. And so he pours out his heart to God. And this is how the psalm begins. Truly, my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from him. And I think that's a great place to start. See, here's where I would start. God, everything is so terrible and nobody likes me and my life is horrible and you have to do something. David doesn't start with all the problems that are going on with him. He starts with the thing that he knows is true. You, God, are my salvation. You are where I find rest. And think about all the things that we do for rest. We get fancy air mattresses, and we get fancy pillows, and we take vacations, and we get breathe right so we can breathe better when we sleep, because we all want rest. And David says, here's where I get rest. My soul finds rest in you, God. You are my salvation. Truly, he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress, and I will never be shaken. And now we're just about to read where he's talking about some problems, but he knows there's something solid. And you know, I think when we think about God being our fortress, I tend to think spiritually, and I'm sure that you do too. Or maybe emotionally. My emotions get all whipped up. I get all tizzied up. Tizzy's a classic old school word. Do any of you use the word tizzy? Amen. All right, you might have to explain it to the rest of the crowd, because they're like, I think he just took fizzy and put a T in, you know. But I started thinking about, yes, God is my rock emotionally. He's my rock spiritually. But the truth is, he's my rock. And he's your rock. I really like science. I wish I knew more science. I'm trying to learn. And I was just thinking, because I'd never thought this before. Maybe it was a good thing I never thought this before. But I was like, everything is made of atoms. So atoms have to stick together or we have a big problem. Like, it's never crossed my mind before that the ocean might just fly apart. I've taken for granted that atoms are going to hold together. And I read a little bit about the atom. And I was like, well, how do I know atoms aren't going to fly apart? Well, because atoms have electrons and they share electrons. So like these atoms are just hanging out like, we have to share an electron, so we got to stay buddies. So you get two H's and an O, and we get some water, and they're all sharing, and it's just like all this. And have you ever seen the picture of an atom? It's just empty space with circles, and it's like, and everything is made of that. Everything. And I've never, ever, ever once in my life feared that I was just going to fly apart. I don't think you have ever feared that either. So then I was like, well, how many atoms are in a human body? And an average human, I might be just a little above average in a bad way. The average human has, oh wow, I'm flipping verses. Thanks, Charles, for pointing that out. I get carried away with my clicker. 7 followed by 27 zeros. It's some number like septillion. A layman's way to say it is there are 7 billion atoms right now being held together in your body. They're being sustained. God created these scientific laws. He created atoms. He created hydrogen and oxygen and carbon, which apparently makes up 99% of you. And if I gave you a whole bunch of hydrogen and a bunch of oxygen and some carbon, could you make a you? I don't think so. I mean, that's unbelievable. And yet we trust in it all the time. All the time I trust in it. You know something else I've never ever worried about in my life? A famine. Because I live in the wealthiest country in the world. And I drive by fields of crops and I don't even think about it. The other day I saw this huge John Deere combine next to this, I think it was a tractor, but it was more like a mountain, and these wagons in this field that was clean. They had harvested. And I was like, yeah, no famine this year in Minnesota. Think about the things that you just take for granted, or, and I know none of you are thinking about this until I say it, running out of air. Yeah, you're like, oh, there's a lot of us in here and we're breathing. Like, what if we aren't going to run out of air? You know why? Because trees are out there making air. And it's this unbelievable system that God keeps going. It says, he says, that he has made a covenant with the sun and the moon and the stars and the seasons. And he hasn't broken it. And he says, if you can break my covenant with them, then you can break my covenant with you. And I don't think any of you can stop the seasons. I just don't think it's going to happen. If you can, please do now, because I don't like winter.
Amen.
He is our rock. And then I started thinking, well, if I trust in him to hold my atoms together, and if I trusted him to fill the fields with crops and send the sun and send the rain, maybe he's big enough that I can trust him with my emotions when I get tizzied up. Maybe he can handle that too. And David, going through all of his problems, he starts and he says, you are my rock. You are my salvation. You are my fortress. I will not be shaken. And then he tells us the problem. How long will you assault me? Would all of you throw me down? Because he has enemies. It's like, what am I doing? What? And you know what? Even if we deserve it, even if we are in the wrong, it's our job as humans to gently restore one another. And it's especially our job as the church. It says in the book of Galatians, if any of you sees a brother trapped in sin, you who are spiritual, restore him gently. That's our job. But whatever was going on, David wasn't being handled gently. He says, how long will you assault me? Would all of you throw me down? This leaning wall, this tottering fence, and the NIV chooses to translate it that way. They don't actually know whether he's talking about himself or whether he's talking about the enemy. The enemy might be as dangerous as a tottering wall that could just fall on him at any time. But here he is, he's talking about this problem he has. Surely they intend to topple me from my lofty place. They take delight in lies. With their mouths they bless. See, he doesn't even know who his enemy is now, because with their mouths they're blessing him, but with their hearts they curse. Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him. Truly, he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. And I'm not reading the same verses. He's repeating himself because he's making sure that he knows and that God knows and that anyone who would ever read this psalm knows that God is his rock, his salvation, his hope, his rest, his fortress. Trust in him at all times, you people, because now he is talking to us. Trust in him. Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. And I know I said this earlier, but if David can repeat himself, so can I. He wants you to pour your heart out to him because he loves you. He already knows, but he wants you to share with him because he loves you. He loves you, and he deeply cares about what is going on. When no one else wants to hear, when no one else will listen, he is always there to listen because he loves you. Surely the lowborn are but a breath. Now he's kind of telling us what our options are. See, if we aren't going to use God as our rock, what are we going to do? The lowborn, that's the common man. The lowborn are but a breath. The highborn are but a lie. Think about that. The common man, he's just a breath. And the rich and famous, it's a lie. We think they have something that we don't have. One of the interesting quotes by Jim Carrey, famous actor, he said, "I hope everyone has all of their wildest dreams come true, and then they will know that it doesn't make you happy." I'm like, wait, that's kind of a bad wish. You're wishing, you're telling me you want all my dreams to come true, so I find out it doesn't make me happy? Okay, thanks, Jim. Don't invite you to my birthday party. But the lowborn, they're just a breath. The highborn are but a lie. If weighed on a balance, they are nothing. Together, they are only a breath. That's mankind, a breath. You put the highborn and the lowborn, you get them together on the scale, and you weigh them, and this is what you get. A breath. Do not trust in extortion or put vain hope in stolen goods. And though your riches increase, do not set your heart on them. Think about that. Riches. I mean, we all want riches. We trust in wealth. We have to be honest. We do. We look at our bank accounts. We plan for retirement. We, stick money away in coffee cans or under our mattress. This week, I heard the sad news, most of you probably heard. Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, passed away. 65 years old. There was a time when I thought 65 was old. Now I'm like, 65? Did he graduate from high school yet? And he was one of the wealthiest men in the world. But his money couldn't save him from cancer. And I hope he had God as his rock. And the sad thing is, it's not like, oh wow, Paul Allen died. It's, oh wow, we are all going to die. It's just a matter of when. We can't escape that. It's our destiny. Sin came into the world and brought death. And whether it's 65 or 75 or 85 or 35, we are all going to die. And we have to have a rock. We have to choose something that we're going to build our life on. And David says, the only thing that is worth it, it's not the lowborn, and it's not the highborn, and it's not being a criminal, and it's not extortion, and it's not wealth. There is one rock. God is the rock. He is the fortress. He is the one that you can hope in. And then David says, one thing God has spoken, two things have I heard. Power belongs to you. In the King James Version, it says, God is great, meaning big and strong and mighty. Two things I've learned. Power belongs to you, God. And with you, Lord, is unfailing love. Unfailing. It will never fail. It does not end. He loves you. He loves you. He loves you. God is powerful and he is loving. And then he says, and you reward everyone according to what they have done. And that's scary when we think about us, because I haven't always done good. But it also means that there will be justice, because there are people who cry out and say, God, why are you allowing this to happen? Why don't you do something? Why don't you stop it? Well, he will do something, and he will stop it. He will repay everyone according to what they have done. And that's why we need him for our hope. We need somebody as our defense. We need someone to protect. And who better than a God who is great and a God who is good, who is loving, and who wants you to pour your heart out to him. Now, the second psalm I want to look at is 77, because So, you guys know Meatloaf, not the food, but like the singer from a long time ago? Meatloaf would have like these rock operas, and like his song would go, doo-doo-doo, and then, ah, and then he would have these. Well, Psalm 77 would make a great rock opera. There's like 3 distinct movements in it. So we start, Psalm 77. I cried out to God for help. And again, this is the Psalm of Asaph, and we don't know what his situation was. And that's the beautiful thing, because whatever the situation was is really irrelevant, because we can connect with him. See, there was a song in the 70s by Elton John, Rocket Man, burning out his fuse up here alone. I miss the earth so much. I miss my wife. It's lonely out in space. I've never been to space, ever, but I can relate to those feelings. And then I was shocked to find out Elton's never been to space either. But he can relate to these feelings of isolation. Well, I can relate to these feelings in this psalm. I don't know the situation, but I can relate, and so can you. I cried out to God for help. I cried out to God to hear me. When I was in distress, I sought the Lord. At night, I stretched out untiring hands, and I would not be comforted. Nothing would work. Nothing comforted me. I remembered you, God, and I groaned. I meditated, and my spirit grew faint. Not just my body, but my spirit was weakened. You kept my eyes from closing. Literally, it says you held my eyelids open. I couldn't even get sleep. This is a bad night. It's rough. Something is going on. There's some deep soul trauma. And I cried out, and I'm looking for answers, and there isn't any. I was too troubled to speak. I thought about the former days. I remembered the good times. I thought about the former days, the years of long ago. I remembered my songs in the night, back when I was filled with joy, and I would sing songs to God because I loved him and everything was wonderful and he was so great. My heart meditated and my spirit asked. And then we go into the second movement, and this is where it gets really troubling. He's asking himself questions. He can't find any rest. Will the Lord reject forever? Like, am I in a place now where I can never ever get back to good with God? Is he just going to push me away forever? Will he never show his favor again? Is there ever going to be a day when his face shines on me again? Is this my life now? Just this deep unrest and stretching out and not being able to sleep and crying out, and there's no comfort. Will he reject forever? Will he never show his favor again? Has his unfailing love vanished forever? Maybe he just doesn't love anymore. I thought it was unfailing, and I was wrong, and so was he. It failed. Has his promise failed? Maybe God just isn't strong enough to keep his promises. And so they have failed. What do I do then? Has he failed for all time? And now it gets even worse. Or maybe he's just forgotten. He's still strong enough, and he still can, but he's forgotten. He's forgotten to be merciful. Or worst of all, his anger. He's so angry, and so he's refusing to be compassionate because of his anger. And this is a dark night. And these are a lot of questions and a lot of problems. Will it ever be good again? And then I thought, this is the third movement, and then I thought, I have to stop thinking those dark things. I need to think better thoughts. And then I thought, to this I will appeal. The years when the Most High stretched out his right hand. It's a dark, cold, harsh night, and I can't rest, and my soul is in trouble, and I just have to fight to breathe. And I have all these questions about maybe God is angry, maybe he will reject forever. No, I'm going to remember who he is. I'm going to remember his character and nature. To this I will appeal. The years when the Most High stretched out his right hand. hand. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your miracles of long ago. I will consider all your works and meditate on all your mighty deeds. Your ways, God, are holy. What God is as great as our God? You are the God who performs miracles. You display your power among the peoples. With your mighty arm, you redeemed your people, the descendants of Jacob and Joseph. And now he starts talking about the Exodus, when the Israelites were in slavery for 400 years, and they're crying out to God, and they're asking him to send somebody. They're asking for relief. And then he speaks to Moses from the flames of the burning bush, and he sends Moses, an 80-year-old man, back to Egypt to say to Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world, let my people go. And Pharaoh says, and then there's plague after plague after plague after plague, until finally God says to Pharaoh, do you not realize that I could have destroyed you? Why are you so stubborn? And then the firstborn of Egypt, because of the hard-heartedness of Pharaoh, are put to death. And finally Pharaoh says, get out of here. And the Israelites leave, and the Egyptians give them all their gold. And so they leave Egypt, plundering Egypt. And they're so happy, everything is great. And then Pharaoh changes his mind, and he sends his army after them. And they're running from Pharaoh's army, and there's the Red Sea in front of them. And now they're like, well, this is worse than ever. And instead of saying, you know what, Moses, you should pray and ask God to rescue us because he did some amazing things back in Egypt. That isn't what they do. They're like, Moses, why did you bring us out here? Aren't there enough graves for us to die in Egypt? And so here's the Red Sea, and there's the Egyptian army, and Moses and the Israelites in between. And the psalmist says, the waters saw you, God. The waters saw you and writhed. The very depths were convulsed. The clouds poured down water. Now, in the story of the Exodus, we don't have any record of a storm. There may have been a storm. This might be oral tradition that was passed on, or it might be that the psalmist is taking poetic license. But he says, the clouds poured down water. The heavens resounded with thunder. Your arrows flashed back and forth. Your thunder was heard in the whirlwind. Your lightning lit up the world, and the earth trembled and quaked. And your path led through the sea. We didn't walk over the water. We didn't walk around the water. We didn't tunnel. We went right through. That was where your path was. Much like Jesus, when he defeated death, he went through death. He broke through to the other side. And when he was dead and in the tomb for 3 days, the Spirit of God said, get up. And he was raised to life. The Israelites in the same way went through the Red Sea. And I love this line. Your path led through the sea, and your way through the mighty waters, though your footprints were not seen. And here's why I love that line. Because most of the time, you will not see his footprints. You won't know where he is. And then you'll look back and you say, he was leading me. He was with me the whole time. I just didn't know it. I talked with a young man last night, and he shared with me a story 2 years ago. 2 years ago on Saturday, he was arrested, had a DUI, went to jail. He realized he had a serious problem with alcohol, and so he started going to meetings. He has a beautiful young wife and 3 adorable children, and he knew he needed to do something. And so he went to meetings, and then he found a church. And the church had some meetings, and so he would just go to these meetings. And then he wanted to be on the worship team because he needed activities. He needed something to do. And he remembers I would go to these meetings, and I would see guys who had their 2-year chip or their 4-year chip or their 20-year chip, and I was like, I don't know if I'll ever be there. I don't know if I can do it. But he just kept going day by day. And he told me last night, I go to meetings now, and I see the guys with their 6-month chip, and I realize I'm the 2-year guy. I'm the guy. And he says, I don't know how I got here. I don't know how I got here. Well, I know because there was someone whose footprints were not seen. leading, and He is with you, and He loves you, and He wants you to pour your heart out to Him, because He is good and He is great. He is almighty. He is our rock. He holds us together. He holds the ocean together. He holds the sun and the moon and the stars together, and He wants you to call Him Father, because that is what and who He is. Let's pray. Father, I just thank you that your footprints are not seen, but you are there, and you are with us. And I don't know the things that everyone here is carrying. I don't know the deep things in their heart that need to be poured out, but I know that you do, and you want to hear, because you love with a love that is so high and wide and long and deep, we will never fully understand it. So we just say thank you, and help us, Jesus. Amen.